Welcome to another episode of Real People, Real Stories, where we provide you with compelling tales from everyday people just like you. I'm your host, John Wendell Adams, author of the novels Betrayal and PayBack, along with the soon-to-be-released novel, Ruthless. You can always find me by going to john@johnwendelladams.com. So for the next 23 minutes, let's get to today's guest.
So rather than just pluck me out of it and sort of take it off my shoulders, he wants me to become stronger so that I can actually bear the weight.
Oh man, Bert, how are you?
I'm doing great, John. How are you?
I'm doing great. But if you would, just tell us your name and what part of the country you live in and what you do.
Yeah, my name is Burt Casey. I'm currently living in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And we started a business a couple of years ago called Fountainhead Taproom. And so I'm operating that business at the moment.
Got it. What I want to do is I want to just jump into this because your story, I think, is very compelling. It speaks to me, and these are my own words, about how you had spent time really trying to be safe and protected, really secure, as opposed to living on the edge, if you will, taking risk and such. Your compelling story in terms of what it is that transpired for you after you graduated from grad school. Tell me about that.
Sort of at the end of school for me, I was, for whatever reason, I started reading the Gospel of Luke, which is a book in the Bible. As I just kept kind of going through it over and over, I started really feeling like God was wanting something from me. It was a little bit ambiguous, but I kind of came to the conclusion that he wanted me to go somewhere. And basically, I felt like that meant out of the country. And so I started, pursuing that, digging into that and trying to figure out, what that looked like. And eventually ended up moving to Vienna, Austria, and volunteered over there at a refugee camp for several years.
Even before you considered and settled on Austria, tell me about the other places you considered and why fundamentally they didn't work out for you.
A lot of the organizations that I explored required raising like $30,000 a year in support. I looked in the Peace Corps for a while. They had some interesting opportunities, but they wanted me to sign a contract saying I would not share my faith with anyone. I didn't feel like I could do that. And at the end of the day, I had a friend, sort of a mentor in the town where I went to college, who knew this person that was working at the refugee camp in Austria, and they were desperate for help and didn't require raising a bunch of money. So it sort of ended up being there by default.
What's the common language in Vienna?
They speak German.
How much German did you speak at the time?
Zero.
Okay. So you're going to a place that you had never been to before.
Right.
You don't speak the language. And so I'm sure that you told some of your family and friends about the fact that this is what you were going to do. What was their reaction?
It was mixed. Some people were very supportive and excited. Some people were very much against it. Some people tried to paint sort of doom and gloom pictures to convince me not to go. Every response across the spectrum, I guess, I got. And for whatever reason, I felt like this was a very permanent decision. I felt like I was going and didn't know if I would come back. And so,
Wow.
that might have made the departure more difficult, because I was having conversations with people, kind of saying goodbye to a lot of people. So lots of mixed responses for sure.
Here you are, you're climbing a plane, you land, you don't speak the language, you don't really know what's going to transpire, but you had some kind of a signal. Tell me what that was. What was your signal?
Yeah, the lady who was working at this refugee camp already, we had been in communication via email. I told her, I'll wear a blue baseball cap when I get off the plane. I hope you're there when I get off the plane, because I don't know anyone and I can't ask for help. Fortunately, that worked out and we connected, and I just followed her across town and she sort of helped me get oriented.
Wow. Talk about risk. Holy cow. Give me some sense of how long your stay was in Vienna.
Yeah, it was a little over 2 years.
I'm compelled to ask you this question. How much money did you actually have when you arrived in Vienna, Austria?
I had $80.
$80.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? My wife and I have been lots of places, but I got to tell you, none of those places have we been overseas where we had $80. How'd you feel?
Doesn't go that far.
Yeah, but how did you feel? I mean, what was going on for you? You're in a strange place, you meet a lady, you've talked to her, communicated with her via email, but you're going to this refugee camp, you get off, you got this blue cap on, you got $80 in your pocket. How are you
Yeah,
feeling that?
maybe there was some level of anxiety. I had a lot of excitement about it. I think in general, I like adventure. I like the idea of adventure. Back then, I don't know how much I really thought through the details. I felt like God was kind of calling me out of my comfort zone, and really, I grew up with a belief in God, but I don't know that my faith has ever really been tested or tried in any way. And is it really mine? Is it really real? Is God really real?
Got
And
it.
so part of it for me was trying to find God, I think.
Well, there were some basic elements that needed to be considered, like your living situation, right? You go into a
Yeah.
refugee camp, and tell me about that. What did that even look like for you?
Initially, the woman that I was going there to work with, she was desperate for help. So she was like, "Hey, you can sleep on my couch until you find a place to stay. You can eat the food the kids eat at the refugee camp." Those sorts of details fit my budget of $80. So it worked for a little while. And then not too long after I arrived, I was able to connect with some folks that ran a printing press down in sort of the industrial part of Vienna. And they had a bed stuck in a room in the basement. And so they gave me access to that in exchange for, some work at the printing press in the mornings.
Now you've got at least a bed. That was probably a little better than the couch, but how about your ability to get from one place to another? What was transportation like for you?
Yeah, I found sort of a website, kind of like Craigslist over there, and was able to get a used bicycle. I think it had been in a wreck. The tires were not completely round. Um, Made lots of interesting noises. But basically, I used that to ride from the printing press into the closest subway station. It was about a mile and a half. And then I could just take public transportation. Public transportation is really great in Vienna. So
Oh,
so once I got
okay.
there, I could get most places.
Got it. So you're living in a basement. I mean, just kind of from my perspective, you're living in a basement. You've got a bed.
Yeah,
In exchange for some work that you're doing, you find this basically almost non-functioning bicycle, right?
yeah.
And you probably have less than $80 in your pocket now. So all this is happening, and then there was some situation that transpired. I mean, basically, you started to complain. So, so tell me what happens to you. I mean, there were some significant things that really happened to you as a result of, I don't know, your condition, mentally, emotionally, maybe. Yeah, just tell me what really transpired.
I did start to complain. I mean, I guess we could say most of us could probably understand that sort of reaction. It's a very natural reaction, I guess, when things aren't going the way you want, but not very helpful. I started to become very anxious about money, and there were days I was sort of eating like a banana a day. It was kind of the cheapest way to get some calories, and just trying to conserve the little bit of change I had left. I missed an opportunity to go home for a family funeral. There's no way I could afford that, and some different things. I just started to really worry about money, become anxious about money, to the point that I think I was making myself almost physically sick with worry. It sort of culminated in an event one evening. I was going back to the room in the basement, and so I got off the subway at the end station, got on the bike, and started riding the mile and a half to the basement. And on the way started really complaining. I mean, there were no people in this part of town. It's all factories, so it's just me and the factories and the crows sitting on the fence. And I really started to complain out loud. You could have heard me if I rode by, as sort of like talking to the sky, complaining at God, like, I thought that you wanted me to go somewhere, and I thought you brought me here, and I'm barely able to eat. I'm missing the funeral. All these things are kind of happening. And I was just really feeling frustrated and sort of abandoned, and sort of right at the height of my, I was really shaking my fist at God and letting him have it. And kind of right in the middle of that, there's a clap of thunder, and it just starts pouring rain on me. Man, that was just like the last straw. I just really got furious. I was blaming God for the rain in that moment. And right in the midst of this really just so sort of furious with the way things were going. The bolts on the front tire of the bike completely come loose. The tire comes off the bike, and I crash into a barbed wire fence. And so now I'm laying kind of twisted up in this fence, bleeding, getting rained on. Somehow in that moment, I sort of saw in my imagination like the picture of this scene, like as if I was a bystander. And it just struck me as hilarious, this kid riding by angry, shaking his fist at the sky. It starts raining, and then he wrecks into a fence. And so I started laughing while I'm laying there. I mean, anyone that had witnessed this would have thought I was nuts for sure. But the laughter, the humor of it kind of broke whatever was going on for me there. And so I gathered myself and the parts of the bike and headed back to the basement on foot.
Right.
And I got in there that night and kind of had a serious talk with the Lord and told him, hey, I can't live this way. I'm making myself sick worrying about stuff. I'm not supposed to be worrying. I know that. And so I'm just kind of putting a stake in the ground right here and just telling you, this is your job now. I'm not worrying about this anymore. Either take care of me or send me home, make some way to send me back, if I heard wrong or whatever.
Right. Well, you had to have been really shaken. I mean, you tumble into a barbed wire fence. You're probably a little cut up. You're rained on. You got a bike that doesn't work. You're living in a basement. You got almost no money. I mean, it's a great way to lose weight, eating a banana a day. I mean, wow, just all this trauma. And yet you were able to, in effect, have a conversation. And maybe if someone had been listening to that, they would have thought, okay, this guy's talking to himself. Apparently, there were some miraculous encounters, events that transpired over the next 2 weeks. Tell me about that.
Well, so, I mean, the very next day I was going to visit a new church that I had heard about. This was early on in my time, so I was still trying to find a place to meet for church. And so I went to a new part of town I hadn't been to before, and I got the time wrong. I got there an hour early and decided just to sort of wander around and get to know this new part of town. And I got to the intersection there on the street and looked down to the side, and there's a bus stop there with a group of people waiting for the bus. And there's an older man there who it looked kind of like Santa Claus, white hair, big white beard. And he seems absolutely drunk, stumbling around, kind of mumbling unintelligibly, to the point that he suddenly falls over backwards on his back and just hits the pavement so hard it makes a noise.
Wow.
And then he starts trying to get up and keeps falling back down. He can't sit up. He can't get up off the ground. And the group of people waiting at the bus stop around him, they all sort of scoot away from him so that he won't bump their feet or touch them. Just witnessing that, for whatever reason, it just made me really angry that nobody would even reach down to help this guy up. And so I kind of storm over there almost really just to spite these people more than anything, and reach down and grab him. And I spoke to him in German because I'm assuming, he's Austrian and German speaking. Right. And I said, let me help you up. And so he grabs my hand and I kind of get him on his feet and dust him off. And he says, "Oh, thank you so much," in English, like no accent, very clear. I thought that was a little strange. I kept speaking to him in German and he kept responding in English. I also started to realize, like, once I got this guy on his feet, he was not acting drunk at all. He was totally sober and speaking clearly and standing straight on his own. And so that also seemed strange to me. He shook my hand, and when he shook my hand, he had a 50 euro bill in his hand that he kind of slid into my hand. That was about $80 US back then. So it was about the same amount of money I came over with to begin with. And, I said, no, I didn't help you up for money. And he's like, no, you take it. That's for you. And we kind of went back and forth, sort of some friendly arguing about that. And finally I was like, okay, that's fine. He seemed all right. So I kind of started walking back to the intersection. And the more I walked away, the more I felt like this is really a bizarre situation. Something strange is going on and I need to find out what. So I stopped and went back over there. And as I came up to him, I was just kind of asking, like, "Hey, man, you sure you're all right?" He said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Where are you headed?" And he said, "I'm going home." And I said, "Well, why don't you let me just ride with you on the bus, make sure you get home okay?" And he said, "No, I appreciate that, but I'll be fine." And so we start having kind of a friendly back and forth. I'm trying to convince him to let me go with him. And he's saying he'll be fine and thank you and no thank you. And as we're in the middle of this conversation, the bus pulls up and he grabs my hand all of a sudden, like to shake my hand. And so I look at him and he winks at me. And when he winked at me, I was in the middle of a sentence and suddenly I just kind of start mumbling. I can't remember what point I was trying to make. I get confused. I can't remember what I was saying. And while I'm standing there kind of confused, he hops on the bus and he rides away.
Wow.
And so there was nothing else to do at that point but head over to this meeting. And so I'm sitting there in this meeting just thinking like, that was a strange encounter. I don't know exactly what it was about. It was one of those things where it's like, did that really happen? And I
Right.
reach in my pocket and there's the 50 euros. So yeah,
Right.
it did happen. What's really wild, I mean, this happened the day after the event with the bike and kind of having this conversation with God about,
Yeah.
I'm not going to worry. You have to take care of it.
Sure.
Within over the next 2 weeks from this event with the guy at the bus station, I had over 2,000 euros just kind of stuffed in my hand by, I don't know, 20 to 25 different people. That's basically what I lived on while I was there during that
So
season.
random people that you did
Yeah.
not know and
Yeah.
circumstances that were just as odd and unique as the guy at the bus.
A good portion of the folks that kind of stuffed money in my hands during those 2 weeks were what appeared to be homeless people. So I'd be going to get on the subway in the morning and someone would rouse themselves out of like a pile of like blankets or clothes or trash and come over to, and this was not an uncommon occurrence. I seemed to be a magnet for that. People generally asking for food or money or things like that. So, that's what I was expecting. And then they'd come up and kind of like mumble something and hold their hand out wadded up, and I'm like, what's happening, and I'd hold my hand out and they'd drop a bunch of wadded up euros into my hand. And I'm like, this is like 100 euros, like, no, you need this more than me. And they're like, no, you take it, and they stumble back off. And so this happened, 20, 25 times over those 2 weeks. And that's what I lived on.
Well, you know what? I'm sitting here now, and there's a part of me that is just trying to wrap my head around what transpired. I mean, you're in a foreign country. You go there for altruistic purposes, this refugee camp. You're living in a basement. You got a bike that doesn't work, basically. You get cut up. You shake your fist at God, and then all these things really start to manifest and transpire.
Mm-hmm.
How did that make you feel when you started to look back at that?
It was a wild time for sure. I mean, looking back at it now, I love that season of my life. It's really precious to me. I felt like in the moment, that God was really trying to teach me some things, specifically like, hey, I got you. I will take care of you, actually. And maybe even I was waiting for you to get out of the way and stop trying to do this yourself so that I can do it, it made me think of there's a story in the Bible where they need money to pay taxes and Jesus tells them to go fishing and they pull a coin out of a fish's mouth that they catch and they pay their taxes with it, which sounds kind of wild, but I mean, this felt that bizarre to me. And so, I think kind of the lesson was, hey, I can and I will take care of you, and you need to trust that I'll do that.
Well, and so thank you for that. And Bert, here's what I gotta say. That was, as you communicated to me, that was like 20 years ago. So so now the stakes are a lot higher. Yeah. You're in a different town, a different state. You're married. You've got a family, 2 kids. You got a business. You got debt, responsibility, obligation. And I guess the question I would ask you is, how are you navigating through this thing of, taking risk, wanting to be comfortable, basically to be what we say in the business world, risk adverse. I mean, how are you navigating through that today?
Well, I mean, to be honest, John, there's a lot of fake it till you make it going on. There's a lot of, one day at a time kind of thing going on. Certainly taking this step was it was a massive risk. When I moved to Austria, it was just me. I was a young kid. There was risk, sure, but the consequences, I think, were significantly less. than the potential negative consequences of like risking our life savings with children and a wife to support, moving to a place we don't know anyone, don't have any connections, starting a business, and now our provision is dependent on this business being successful. And then we get here, and 2 months after we open the business, COVID happens and they forced the business to close for a good chunk of that year. It was a dramatically difficult season. It was a brutal season. That's the truth of it. It's been the most difficult season of my life. Something I sort of recognized moving towards this decision, you know, I got a great business mentor through a program, and he was kind of calling me out on my desire. You know, he recognized I wanted to have my list of steps. You know, here's 1 through 10 in order. Here's the steps, and we're going to execute this plan, and everything's going to work great. And I wanted to know every detail of that plan before I stepped out. And so he was calling me out on that and just saying, hey, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, this doesn't work. You know, even if you have a good plan, things don't go according to plan. And what do you do then? And just really encouraging me, you got to stick your neck out. You got to step out without knowing everything.
Right.
And so, I mean, a big part of that decision was trusting that God is real, that God loves us, that he has plans and purposes for our lives, and that we're free to sort of move about and take risks and trust that he's there. You know, like my kids, now that I have kids, you know, we let them try things, and as they get older, maybe more and more risky things. And if they get hurt or if they mess something up, we're there to bandage them up or to help them, you know. So there's some security in knowing that someone is there.
Right. I will say this to you. I had a conversation with someone just recently who is taking on a new job, living in a new city. And, you know, it's a big job. It's very impressive, right? And they said something to me about how they were worried, concerned. And I said this thing to them. I said, you know, we make our plans. And as soon as I said that, they interrupted me and said, yeah, and then God laughs. And we both chuckled from that, right? Yeah. And then we went on with the conversation. I thought about it later as I continued to talk with her. And I said, well, you know what? Let me just tell you this, that, you know, we do make our plans. God laughs, and then he orders our steps. And it seems to me that as you've talked about both the phenomenon that you went through in Austria and what it is that you're facing today, you just said it, to be an entrepreneur, you can create all these plans, but then you've got to take some risk. And someone said to me not long ago that another word to say faith is really R-I-S-K, risk. Yeah. And so it seems to me that that's one of the things that you're facing right now. But I guess I would ask you this question. As we come to close to the end of our time together, if you had an opportunity to talk to another person or a group of folks, you know, what would you really say to them about this journey that you had been on, that you're on currently? What do you think you'd say to them associated with things that they should consider if they're facing a similar set of circumstances?
That's a good question. I think that one of the critical pieces for me through this whole process has been a shift in perspective. For a lot of us, and certainly for me, for a lot of my life, when difficult things come up, my instinct is to kick and scream and do whatever I can to get rid of the difficult circumstance. You know, I want to be rescued from whatever that trial is. I want to be rescued from the pain. I want to avoid the pain.
Right.
I feel like trying to teach me that more than just rescue me from some situation, he wants to actually work in the situation to help me become stronger so that I can carry more weight. So rather than just pluck me out of it and sort of take it off my shoulders, he wants me to become stronger so that I can actually bear the weight. And it's easier to bear because I'm becoming stronger as I stand up under it, and that I'm able to carry more and able to handle more, and that he wants to give me more responsibility as I'm able to sort of step up under what I already have on me.
I appreciate that. I really do. And what I think you're saying is, as time goes on and more circumstances and situations you're confronted with, it gives you a greater challenge to do exactly as you said.
The only thing I would add to that is that I I think another perspective shift for me from sort of my early 20s until now has been just really discovering that God is good,
Yes.
that he's a good father. And, it's a very different experience stepping out and taking risks when you think you've got a God or a father who's waiting with a stick to get you when you mess up, versus a father who really loves you and wants your success more than you do, and actually is planned for your success and is working in every situation and circumstance to pour blessing on you. That's really helped me a great deal to be able to step out with confidence and sort of weather whatever comes with confidence.
Bert, that is a great perspective, and I certainly thank you for that. One of the things that I want to encourage, ask you really, but also encourage you as well, is you continue on with this path that you're on, associated with this business, and raising two kids and being a father and a husband to your wife. It seems to me that you are on a good path, and it's one that you have to kind of pick up your cross responsibility daily and move forward. But I'd like to ask you, if you would please, to consider coming back as you get further along. There's going to be new phenomenon, new challenges, new ways for you to do the very thing that you just said there at the end. I'm going to ask you to consider coming back and sharing with us about some of the things that you've learned as well.
Yeah, sure. That'd be great.
Bert, it's been great having you on Real People, Real Stories, and I look forward to sharing with you again.
Good talking to you, John.
Yeah, great talking to you. Thanks a lot. You can always find me by going to john@johnwendelladams.com.